meeting order. Pledge allegiance, Supervisor Crown.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call.
Mr. Conover? Here. Mr. Monroe?
Here.
Mr. Gerard?
Here.
Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Brock?
Here.
Mr. Kenny?
Here.
Mrs. Frazier? Here. Mr. Simpson?
Here.
Mr. Vanslow? Mr. Dickinson?
Here.
Mr. Merlino?
Here.
Mr. Strauss?
Here.
Ms. Sieber? Here. Mr. Sokol?
Here.
Mr. Beatty?
Here.
Mr. Westcott?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Wood? Here. Chairman Garrity?
Here. Okay. Next item of business would be to enter into executive session to discuss the matters leading to the appointment of a particular person or position of county attorney. What's the pleasure of the board? Yes. Supervisor Conover, motion. Second. Supervisor Dickinson, any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Do you want to go into executive session for another reason, or are you going to hold it separate?
Separate. Yeah. We have a motion and second to go in to talk about the position of county attorney. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, we'll go into executive session to talk about county attorney. With no action taken. I've asked Larry Palkowitz here today to brief the board on the closing of the Westmount, and I believe that would go in an executive session with the attorney.
I defer to Larry on that.
Siemens. Okay, so do I have,
Can we discuss that afterwards, though? I mean, does that have to be taken for, the executive session with the discussion on Siemens?
you want to do that first?
I'd rather have the open discussion while people are still here.
Okay,
You know, I mean, that to me, and then, because if we go to executive session for
Okay.
that part first, we'll lose.
sure. Larry, you want to talk about the closing, where we are?
Thank you.
As you know, we're progressing towards the closing on the sale of Westmount so that the purchaser would take over effective January 1 of 2016. We've been working on the closing documents with the buyer's attorney, and I know my partner sent out documents this morning that were related to the closing. We're still trying to finalize some of the information coming from the county in terms of some of the details with regard to certain accounts with patients, as well as pieces of the actual closing statement. Hopefully we'll have that completed today, and that we're proceeding towards that closing on December 31.
Okay, open up for questions for Larry. Go ahead, Supervisor.
I don't have the documents in front of me because I just got them this morning at 5:49, so I thought we'd have a hard copy at least here, but we don't. So, but it's my understanding that they'll pay more because we're closing December 31st. There's an additional $100-something thousand. Is that correct, Larry?
The number's wrong, but as you recall, the contract calls for additional payments each month that we were delayed in closing through December of 2015. The number is just rounded $90,000.
And they're going to pay that, correct?
Correct.
That was my question.
Okay. Peter.
I just say, I haven't seen the document yet, Larry, but I will when I get home. The language as it relates to Siemens, could you just quickly summarize?
I really can't summarize here. We should discuss that in executive session.
Any other supervisors? Any questions on the closing for Larry? Okay, I'll open up to public. Anybody wish to ask Larry a question on the closing?
Travis Whitehead, Queensbury. The document I have here, shows that if the sale were to proceed December 2015, the price would not be $800,000 for the operations, but $989,418, less $61,000 for their share, I think, of the hookup of the connection back to the grid. Are those the numbers we're talking about? We're going to just stick with the numbers that are in the contract? Okay. So, I just got these this morning as well, so I have a lot more questions than I do answers. But one of the sentences in the certificate of regarding representations and warranties, paragraph C, says that all conditions of seller's obligation to close the sale contemplated by the agreement have been satisfied or waived by seller, and yet there's no description of what's been waived or not. And I just would encourage you all to make sure that you wouldn't sign. This is basically a blank check, and I would make sure that you would know. I would suggest you strike or waived and know just exactly what might have been waived in there before you act. Doesn't sound like you're going to act today, though. The only other point I wanted to make is that they referenced a deed that went back to 1919, and in that deed it states that this person sold this property to the county as a site for the establishment of a county hospital in, by, and for Warren County. You might want to get an opinion as to whether or not, that is still going to be true once you sell it to a private firm out of New York. But if I were the heirs of this person, I'd be probably filing a suit saying that I sold it to you under one condition and you're using it for another. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
And maybe this is just a question for Larry, but, over the last few weeks, I know several of us, including some supervisor-elects, have been asking for this paperwork. Obviously, it came this morning. There's no way any of us had a chance to really take a good look at that. But when I asked Martin, he said this is just an FYI for us. There's really nothing we can do to change whatever these documents are moving forward that we voted on it. This is now in your hands. Are you taking Travis's input or supervisor's input, and are you able to make any changes, or what's the reality of this, or are we spinning our wheels?
I don't know about spinning wheels, but I think what Martin was explaining was the fact that no further action. I saw an email that he responded to you, I believe, said that there was no further action that was required by the Board of Supervisors, that you have taken all the necessary action to allow the closing to occur. The asset purchase agreement and the real estate purchase agreement contain the requirements of the county, and so that's what we were proceeding to closing with those elements. So if, in fact, there were some input that you want to provide in terms of a document, certainly we're willing to look at that. I've been working closely with the county attorney's office and the county administrator and pulling all this information together, as my partner, Trish Watkins, has been the person who's been actually doing the ministerial acts of pulling all the information together to be able to supply the documents we had to prepare to the buyer's attorney and reviewing the documents that the buyer's attorney prepared that we would review prior to closing. So that there's no official action that has to be taken, but certainly if there's any input that anybody wants to give to these documents, the end result is that we're going to adhere to the terms that are in the asset purchase agreement and the real estate purchase agreement, which this board reviewed and approved.
So those documents were sent out this morning. What's the deadline in getting information back to you with any possible concerns?
Well, up until, December 31, but hopefully I'm not sure what it is that the information that you're looking, or what information you want to provide in terms of the documents. I mean, certainly, let's take the deed, for example. That's been prepared in accordance with the documents that were there. That's been forwarded to the buyer's title insurance company. The buyer's title insurance company has reviewed them and issued a report. that affects the buyer and their, good title in the property. No issue has been raised with regard to any reversionary provisions that Mr. Whitehead just referenced. Again, that's the issue for the, for the buyer and the title company. So I can't imagine that there would be something in connection with the deed. And again, it was our responsibility to prepare that deed and the accompanying affidavits and documents that have to accompany the deed in order to transfer the real property. So that, again, if there's something when you review the documents that you want us to consider, certainly we will do that, and we can do that up until the day of the closing.
Any other questions? Supervisor West.
Chairman, thank you. Larry, Travis had a chance to glance at these docs this morning and make some comments. The one that caught my ear, and I don't really know what he's talking about because I didn't look at him, but this blank check comment that he made, and request to strike them. Just the blank check waiver language, that was the one I wrote down. Could you explain that?
Sure. First of all, it's not a blank check. The asset purchase agreement, the real estate purchase agreement are the documents that are beholden to both parties. That's standard language that goes into those kinds of certifications that basically in order to close, there has to be representations that are made by the seller and the buyer that says that either they've occurred or they're being waived so that nobody has a claim after the closing. As far as this particular transaction is concerned, I'd have to go through all of the representations that were made by both sides. I can tell you both sides are adhering to the representations that have been made. So there is no blank check that's out there. The county is going to receive what it expects to receive pursuant to the asset purchase agreement and the real estate purchase agreement, and the buyers are going to receive the transfer of the assets that are referenced in the asset purchase agreement and the real estate purchase agreement.
Okay, so I'll look at it and I'll talk to Travis about it, and I'll see if what you just said to me makes sense within that context. So you're saying this is a necessary provision and it's protected by those other provisions within the document that in the deed that ultimately represent what the board voted. That's my long and short
Correct.
assessment of it.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
So,
Hi, Claudia Bramer from the 3rd Ward of Glens Falls. And I just want to reiterate that Supervisor Sieber and some others had been requesting these documents. This is a very important deal to the citizens of the entire county. And I appreciate that Attorney Paltrowitz has been working with the county attorney and the county administrator to go through these documents and make sure that they are ready for closing. But we deserve an opportunity to review these as the supervisors. We cannot afford to have any mistakes at all. And I know they're trying to avoid those mistakes, as any good attorney would be doing. But we are your clients. We should have had an opportunity to review these prior to us just rushing into closing. If we need to wait so that everyone has had a chance to review them, so our citizens who also have expertise and knowledge in these areas have had a chance to review them, then we should do that. I mean, we're already losing money. We understand that. But the way the Siemens contracts were written, they were so heavily favored towards Siemens. If you looked at them at all, every single provision that could have gone to Siemens' way went their way. So if there's anything, like this standard provision that he's talking about, I don't know what that is. I have no idea. But if it's something that we could take out, if we pushed harder, then let's take it out. It doesn't have to be there necessarily. And I'm just asking that we all get a chance to review that before we close on this very important deal to our citizens.
one more time, Travis.
I just want to address just that point that's already been discussed, and I agree with Attorney Paltrowitz on 90% of what he said. The fact that it seems that no further action would need to be taken. There was a point in time where we had a 2/3 vote, County Law 215. We have an agreement. My point, though, is if anything in that agreement gets changed, anything, or waived, which is the same as changing it, that you would probably have to go back through that procedure, again, and get a 2/3 vote, which probably you wouldn't get today. So I want to make sure that, those words "or waived" be stricken, because if what, Mr. Paltrowitz says is true and there is absolutely no change, then there's no need to have "or waived" in there. That's all I have to say on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we need an executive session to talk about potential litigation with Siemens. Do we have a motion by Supervisor Simpson, second by Supervisor Frazier to go into executive session? Executive session. Any announcements? Privilege of the floor. I'd like to wish everybody a Happy New Year and a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Dickinson, second by Supervisor. Thank you all for coming.